Welcome to the Buddha Belly Life Podcast, empowering purpose, mind to microbiome, a mind-body-soul approach to life, starting with your gut. Join me, Coach Britt, as I interview top wellness entrepreneurs and microbiome science geeks, and together we mastermind a bucket list kind of life while building the ultimate vessel to live it in. Welcome to your Buddha Belly Life. Don't forget to take notes. Hey guys, welcome back to the Buddha Belly Life Podcast. I'm Coach Britt, and welcome to session 3 of Overgrown, where we're joined again by Tracey Merritt, a regional account manager and functional medicine consultant with Microbiome Labs, where we have been discussing specifically overgrowth, the issue of bacterial overgrowth, what it's causing, and specifically Sibo, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. The prevalence of it is so much greater than I believe most people know. Conventional medicine is still quite in the dark about this, and many unanswered conditions and issues that people have, we're finding can be very, very commonly tied to this condition of the body having a state of Sibo. So today we're going to rejoin with Tracey, where she was talking all about her story with Sibo. She's given us some rad science on some of the most cutting edge and evolving science regarding the gut microbiome and specifically Sibo. And today we're going to have her back to discuss a little bit more about the solution about what she did, right? Welcome back, yes. Tracey.
Yes, thanks so much for having me, Brittany. And yeah, this is, it's so fun to talk gut health and Sibo and then what we can do about it. Definitely.
Totally. And so you, like you were telling me, you struggled for, just to recap for you guys, she was a new mom. She had young kids, which is something we talk about a lot because that is a lot of people's stories. How the heck can we take care of our children? That's the worst thing. Chronic illness, and especially what they call invisible illness, where people don't really know anything's wrong with you. They don't have an answer for you. When so many people are dealing with this, especially women, and having to caretake for children and family members, and we just can't. It's almost an impossibility. And so to not have answers, to not have something that we can move forward or look forward to, her story is going to help a lot of people, maybe turn some light bulbs on, give some hope for something that you feel, if you're being told that there's just no answer for what you're dealing with. So from excessive weight loss to extreme stomach viruses to skin issues to all these unexplained things. And then you said absolute, almost a manic episode, essentially, of not being able to sleep ever postpartum. Even it wasn't just because of baby. That's when you should be crashing, right?
Yes, exactly.
So a year it took you to get to a place where after they told you, it was just stress over and over, right? So it took a year before you got to a place where someone said Sibo. So what then? How did your journey begin at that point?
Yeah. So that was about 8 years ago, and Sibo was pretty brand new on the scene at that point. The Sibo breath test had just launched. So I was pretty new to have got that test done. It tested positive. And the thought process then was to either do an antibiotic called rifaximin, that's still used sometimes now, or antimicrobials. So you could go 2 different routes. Antimicrobials would be things like olive leaf, oil of oregano, garlic, neem, things like that. So I thought, well, I think an antibiotic is what got me here, set me up to have a lot of this health issues. So I'm going to go the other route and do these antimicrobials. And so I was seeing a naturopath, and we were just rotating high dose antimicrobials, which I will have to say, fast forward, a year of rotating antimicrobials. I had made some headway, but as you know, and probably talk to your listeners, is we used to think it would not touch the good bacteria, but we now know high dose antimicrobials, they will start to kill off your good bacteria. So although I was making some headway with Sibo, I went backward in developing a horrendous histamine intolerance. And histamine intolerance is going to present.
Can you elaborate a little bit on histamine intolerance? Because this is common. And
yes, so common. When there's gut dysbiosis, or Sibo even, or both, histamine intolerance is very common. And so it could be flushing. It could be diarrhea. So for me, it would send me to the bathroom 10 times a day. So where the Sibo symptoms had got better, now I was trapped at home. I had to be near a bathroom. If you're eating,
which is something a lot of people don't talk about and they deal with and they don't talk about, because who wants to admit that or talk about that? So things just get worse.
It's so true. And if you ever feel like you eat leftovers and then don't feel very good afterward, because there's bacteria starting to grow and the histamine gets higher and higher on bacteria, on foods that have been sitting in the refrigerator. Fish can be really high histamine. So there's a lot of foods that fall into this high histamine category.
Wine, right? Wine. Like a lot of people, they're like, I would get really flushed if I'd have, wine or something that they just like, whoo, their whole face gets red.
Yes, that's how I was. It would be my ears. My ears would get bright red. That's crazy. So I made a couple steps forward, but a couple steps back. And now again, with just the more cutting edge science, we know, okay, that might not be the best way to go. So luckily, we've had some advancements and know we really can use a lot of the good guys, which was a no-no. 8 years ago, it was do not take probiotics. If you have Sibo, you're going to make it worse. Because again,
add more bacteria because there's too many bacteria there.
Yes. And we also thought, like in the last episode, we talked about originally they thought it was good bacteria overgrown in the small intestine. So if you add probiotics, you're adding fuel to the fire. Where we now being able to identify what microbes are overgrown in the small intestine. There might be some that are the good guys, but there's a lot of staph, strep, a lot of other pathogens actually that are causing Sibo for so many people.
So it's almost like the dysbiosis, which when we say dysbiosis means an imbalanced ratio of bacteria from good to bad of what's ideal, what's ideal to maintain a healthy ecosystem in the gut. And so it's almost like when there is a dysbiosis, which means way more of the pathogenic bacteria than should be there, that it's like forcing its way higher into the body. Like it's residing higher mostly there. It's not a lot of the good bacteria that's really getting there. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah. So I would say the way I was able to eventually get rid of it, which it took me about 2 years. So just know for anybody who's got Sibo, it's a journey. It's not something that always will go away in 2 to 3 months, but we've got to not just address the overgrowth. We've got to address how you got it and the bigger root cause, because Sibo is a secondary condition to something bigger going on.
Mm-hmm. And to touch on that with like antibiotics and probiotics. So antibiotics, like you said, you had been on antibiotics and you developed Sibo and they didn't help. Like they made your skin, like you said in the last episode, they gave you antibiotics for your skin at the time that you didn't know was correlated to your gut. And it made your skin worse. They thought it would help, but it made it worse. And it's likely because it killed even more bacteria because biotic means, life. So anti-life means to kill it. But what we know about antibiotics is that they decimate a lot of bacteria. It's not like they just go for the pathogenic bacteria. They decimate a lot of it. And sometimes they don't touch some of those pathogens that may be causing us the biggest grief. Am I right?
Yeah.
Opinion on that?
Yep, exactly. So
that's like C. diff. And
yes. Yeah, because when we take an antibiotic, now rifaximin's a little different, and I'll explain how it's a little different, but your traditional antibiotics are just going to be like dropping a bomb on your microbiome. You'll never get rid of everything to the 100th degree. But those little bits left, the pathogens are going to grow back way faster. And that's where a lot of times, if many of you have taken an antibiotic, you might get thrush afterward from yeast, or you might get like a yeast infection or a C. diff, like you're mentioning, because you've got rid of all those good protective bacteria and the pathogens will grow back quicker. So there's so much we can do now to help remedy if you even have to take an antibiotic, because there might be a time You just have to, right? If
Mhm.
surgery or something, you've got to take it.
Yeah. I mean, and antibiotics were, I mean, when they were invented, it was like, I mean, it's a miracle for certain things. But what happened is we ended up just throwing them at everything. You know, we've got our kids constantly being given antibiotics for, you know, viral ear infections left and right, you know, where antibiotic doesn't even touch a viral infection. And just over and over and over, and we're just decimating our bodies. Not to mention there's antibiotics in our food. I mean, that can be a whole nother set of episodes, you know, of things. But so we have the probiotics. So pro, you know, anti means anti-life. Probiotic means pro, you know, life essentially in layman's terms. And so how did, you know, is there a place for probiotics? Like you said, originally it was a no-no. Is it still a no-no with certain probiotics though? Because that's the thing. Not all probiotics are created equal. That's how Tracey and I connected. That's how, you know, we're not just pushing Microbiome Labs right now, although we do partner with them and use their product because they just have top shelf stuff. But not all probiotics are created equal. There's a lot that, you know, go into that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to follow up on the rifaximin, that one they say will stay isolated only in the small intestine. So many of you may have tried it, or if you would like to try it, that's still an option. But again, I think like what you're saying, Brittany, there are options to use probiotics. If you need to, for a short period of time, to use an antimicrobial, that may be needed, but really we can use the good guys to crowd out the bad guys. And like you said, not all probiotics are created equal. So we basically at Microbiome Labs have created the first all spore-based probiotic. It's using 5 different bacillus spores, but there's some really unique factors about bacillus spores. So one thing first is these have actually been used since the 1950s in Europe as a prescription. So they're relatively new to the United States, but these have been used, I mean, for decades and decades. And a very real interesting story that your listeners might like is the way they found bacillus spores. So the way they even found these and what they do is in 1950, when World War II was going on, the German soldiers had gone to North Africa and they were getting a lot of dysentery. And the North Africans, when they would get dysentery, they would eat dried camel dung and it would get rid of it. And so they were feeding these German soldiers with dysentery, dried camel dung, and it was—
Which is what you want to eat when you have dysentery.
Yeah. But who would have known, right? So these German scientists go out there, they take some of it back, they isolate it, and they found Bacillus subtilis and Bacillus clausii. And that is how this German prescription came about. And it's being used in Latin America and Europe. Little did we all know here in the US, right? And so Karan at Microbiome Labs ended up formulating this 5 bacillus strain probiotic. So, okay, so it can help things like dysentery, but what else can they do? What's making them different than lacto and bifidobacteria probiotic blends is we know that lacto and bifido really aren't hardy enough to survive that harsh gastric system. So we were talking about that hydrochloric acid. It is a protective mechanism. And if you ever have
That's probably why so many products, they try to do the special capsules or keep them in the fridge or all these things. And we're like, the gut's going to decimate it when it hits you because those are the strains that they're focusing on.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And now people might feel a little better when they take a lacto-bifido blend. So I definitely wouldn't say it's not having any benefit. There is some research right now that you'll even see us start to talk about it more about even how the bacteria dead in the large intestine some strains can confer a health benefit. But they're not adjusting and going after the dysbiosis like we thought they were for so long. So these bacillus spores sit in like a hard endospore, which I like to call it an armadillo shell. So they're going to sit in this hard shell. They don't open up and become active until they're past the gastric system. They open up in the gut and they become active and they start producing things like short chain fatty acids to feed all that good gut bacteria. But here's the other great part. They produce antimicrobial compounds So they act like an antimicrobial herb, but you're using the good guys to produce these compounds and compete with the pathogens. And we call them a competitive excluder. So they're going to crowd out basically the pathogenic overgrowth in the small intestine or in the large intestine.
That's amazing to me. Like I love the science of that. That's like, why we work with this. But so let me reiterate a little bit for people, layman's it just a little bit, and tell me if I am missing something on this. So basically this is like an undercover, let's say, what do you call it? What are the why am I missing the word on this? The sea ships. Like what are the...
Oh, I can't think of it. Sorry.
The submarine. It's like a submarine, right? That's going in the water, and it's like bomb proof. And your army doesn't get out until it makes its way all the way to shore. So instead of taking the ship that the enemy can take out or bomb, or the weather tips the ship over, or a storm comes in and knocks it out or kills the crew, instead we put them in a submarine that's below the water that makes it to the destination, and they can get out there and do their job. And then so basically what these spores are doing when they open up is not only are they caretaking, so with the short chain fatty acids, what are those doing for the gut environment? So it's producing short chain fatty acids, which are doing what to help the gut environment?
Yeah, they are the favorite fuel source of your good gut bacteria. They use it for
energy. They're like feeding their buddies there. They brought food and fuel.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. To improve in numbers. And I will tell you what, the science is showing gut diversity is the hallmark of health. So we've got to have a diverse amount of microbes in there and in good enough numbers. And that's what the spores can do, is they're going to feed your good guys and they're going to help diversify. And here's a couple of things just so people don't get worried. You might hear the word spore and you think mold spore, that must be bad. Will they become overgrown? Will they turn on me? They will not become pathogenic, and they will pass through the stool about every 21 to 28 days. So they're not going to just create this huge amount and become overgrown either.
So it's like they're just planted in there doing work for you, and then they leave when they're done. It's like elf on the shelf, but for your gut.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah.
I like to do analogies.
Yes. Yeah. It really is fascinating. And if you ever want to look up again at like kind of a science nerd term, it's called quorum sensing. And that is the way microbes talk to one another. So again, we're here having this human experience, but microbes are so intelligent and they've got their own way of talking just like we do. They send chemical signals, they identify one another, they count one another. So the bacillus spores are doing the exact same thing. And that's how they can identify these pathogen overgrowths, sit next to it and start producing these antimicrobial compounds to crowd them out.
Mm-hmm. And to wrap up, I guess, and elaborate on that concept, what is interesting to me, and if you ever hear me talk about the gut, you'll hear me say that like the internal ecosystem is almost just like a representation, just as our external ecosystem is, how our nature needs, has all these different species of animals and plants and things that create oxygen and this and air and water and all these things that work together. Our gut is just like that. And so, it may sound weird to say that your gut microbes can communicate, but how the heck does a bunch of birds fly together and turn on a dime? Because they're communicating. Animals in nature communicate. These are species that just happen to live in our body on a small level. It's like having a bunch of people in there doing work for you, for your help, right?
Yeah. And so the bacillus spores, why you might choose that to be part of a Sibo protocol, is not going to be just that antimicrobial part of it, but also that it can begin to stimulate the proteins of the tight junctions that have become loosened. And that's what's created leaky gut, right? We've got those holes in the gut lining. It will stimulate those cells to come closer together, and less LPS that we talked about in the last episode, that toxin that can go up to the base of the brainstem, somewhat paralyze that migrating motor complex, which is moving your food through to digest at a good rate. So the more we can heal the gut, not just go after the overgrowth in the small intestine, but heal more toward the root cause, heal up the large intestine and heal up that gut lining. Now we're getting to the bigger picture. So we've got to reduce inflammation, heal the gut lining, and get that food moving through at a more adequate rate, or it will come right back, even if you use antimicrobials or rifaximin.
So common treatment is just to kill off the bad stuff because we have an overgrowth, so we must kill it. Whereas this approach, while it takes patience, it's just like, long-term weight loss or something, as opposed to quick weight loss. It doesn't come back as easy if we're tending to the whole ecosystem of the gut. So these types of probiotics that we're talking about are going to go in and help with the entire ecosystem and functionality of the gut with the lipopolysaccharide issue and with the leaky gut issue, with the brain gut communication that's causing stagnation in the gut and not processing food, as well as feed the good bacteria so you have a bit better, stronger army, as well as work against the pathogenic bacteria, as opposed to just targeting the pathogenic bacteria like we originally thought. That is amazing.
Oh
my gosh.
Perfect overview.
Oh, that's it. Oh, that's great, Tracey. So thank you so much for this episode, you guys. Again, take notes, please, rewatch if you can. I hope you're learning, and I hope it's giving you hope and empowerment and education. And it's just, firing you up to learn more about this stuff. And we have one more session with Tracey that's coming up next week. And so I look forward to that. And thank you guys for joining today. Thanks for joining us in this week's Buddha Belly Life podcast. For more episodes, coaching resources, and gut programs, visit buddhabellylife.com. Don't forget to put us in your schedule for next week. And remember, keep showing up and enjoy the journey.